Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The presidential race is already heating up. An amazing survey from Quinnipiac shows Joe Biden dramatically ahead of President Trump. However, the Faith and Freedom Foundation says not so fast. The evangelicals have 83% favorable for the president, and that looks like the voting bloc is going to support him. But something else amazing, NPR has released the fact that they are monitoring their announcers. They're no longer allowed to identify an unborn child as a baby. He has to be called a fetus. They cannot use terms like pro-life. It is unbelievable that they can be. There's no such thing as anti-abortion, and pro-life is forbidden them. This is a thing that's sponsored by the United States government, and it's just shocking. But anyhow, Joe Biden said President Trump is, quote, a threat to the nation. And the president fired back and said he is mentally weak. The verbal attacks flew hot and heavy in Iowa yesterday. And when the president and the Democrat presidential frontrunner visited the state, as Charlene Aaron reports, this could just be the beginning of a long, nasty campaign.
Tough talk between President Trump and the Democratic frontrunner in Iowa Tuesday gave voters a glimpse of what could lie ahead in the 2020 presidential campaign. The former vice president calling Trump a threat to the nation.
The president is literally an existential threat to America.
Trump called Biden a failing candidate, labeling him 1% Joe, who is slower than he used to be.
He was someplace in Iowa today, and he said my name so many times that people couldn't stand it anymore. No, don't keep saying it. Sleepy guy.
Speaking on CBN News' Faith Nation program, Matthew Continetti of the Washington Free Beacon explained why Trump is zeroing in on Biden.
Well, Biden's currently at the top of the Democratic pack, and I think that attracts President Trump's attention. And so whoever's going to be in that top slot is going to be the person that President Trump devotes his attacks to.
One surprising move, Biden flip-flopping on the need to get tough on China. Just last month, he said China is not competition for us. But yesterday, he said this: we are in competition with China. We need to get tough with China. But he still criticized the president's policy of using tariffs, saying it harms American farmers and consumers. The White House has imposed 25% tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese imports and plans to tax more. He's convinced the pressure will force China to make a deal in the same way they worked on Mexico last week.
And you know what happens with tariffs? Companies will move out of Mexico, and they'll move out of China, and they'll come into the United States.
Do you think the same strategy that President Trump used with Mexico will also work with China?
I hope so. I think all Americans hope that this strategy of holding these countries' feet to the fire and using American leverage. We clearly had leverage over Mexico, and that's how Trump scored a big victory.
In a first look at head-to-head 2020 presidential matchups nationwide, according to the independent Quinnipiac University poll, several Democratic challengers lead President Trump, with former Vice President Joe Biden ahead 53 to 40%. Meanwhile, President Trump still has strong support among evangelicals. A new survey commissioned by the Faith and Freedom Coalition finds 83% of white evangelical voters approve of the president and the work he's doing in office. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thanks, Charlene. Those polls really don't mean a whole lot right now. There's a couple things I noticed. Number one, some years ago, the Democrats could rely on the large labor union as the base of their support. Right now, the Republicans rely on the evangelicals, and I don't think any president in my lifetime has done as much for evangelicals in terms of judicial appointments, in terms of dealing with the Johnson Amendment, in terms of scaling back onerous regulations. It's been a fabulous time for evangelicals, and their support is massively for him. So we'll see how that breaks out. There's something else I noticed, though. Joe Biden, you know, I really like him personally. We've been, I consider, friends over the years. He is looking really old and tired, and whatever he's doing, he needs to start getting a personal trainer and doing something to Because when you start looking gaunt this early in the game, you're not going to make it. So TV is important. If nothing else, Joe, get yourself a makeup artist, okay? Well, in other news, House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler is going to request a court order to force former White House counsel Don McGahn to testify. It harks back to the former Attorney General Eric Holder, who defied Congress, and his case was just settled a few weeks ago. So that's a long, drawn-out fight. Ephraim Graham has that.
Well, Pat, this comes after the House approved a resolution effectively holding McGahn and Attorney General William Barr in civil contempt of Congress. As Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson reports, the measure isn't only about forcing McGahn and Barr to cooperate.
The Justice Department argues House Democrats are picking a fight over documents Attorney General Bill Barr maintains he's not at liberty to disclose. The fight on the Hill is heading to court.
It's something Congress has never done before. It's not enforcing about subpoena power.
Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called the civil contempt resolution an underhanded ploy for impeachment.
They're trying to get to impeachment without having their members actually vote upon it.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi counters this battle is about enforcing congressional power.
My obligation is to do whatever we do in the most effective way possible.
But at an event in Washington, Speaker Pelosi wouldn't rule out an impeachment.
It's not off the table.
In defiance of congressional subpoenas, the White House has invoked executive privilege to prevent former counsel Don McGahn from testifying. And Barr maintains Justice Department regulations require grand jury material be kept secret, even from Congress.
No single person in the United States of America is above the law.
The civil resolution is the latest muscle flexing from House Democrats after backing down from voting to hold Barr in criminal contempt. That came only after the Justice Department agreed to provide some underlying material from the Mueller report.
We are going to use every available means at our disposal to enforce our right as a separate and co-equal branch of government to hold a potentially lawless administration accountable.
Republican Steve Scalise said American priorities are at odds with a Democratic drumbeat towards impeachment.
You're seeing on the floor again this week Speaker Pelosi wasting her majority on presidential harassment.
Charging Barr or McGahn with a civil lawsuit could bring the case to court fairly quickly, but resolving that case is another matter. After Attorney General Eric Holder's case went to court during the Obama administration, legal proceedings only ended last month after nearly 7 years. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
As you noted, Pat, this could be a long legal battle.
You know, I just want to point out a joke. These Democrats are saying the American people want to know, the American people demand to know, the American people. They don't represent the American people. It is strictly a partisan game, and they always say, well, you know, we're a co-equal branch of government, and we represent the American people, and the American people need to know. The American people don't want to know any such thing. I mean, who are they to speak for, quote, the American people? It's a joke, but it sounds so pompous when they do it, and I just think we ought to stick a pin in that balloon because I'm sick of hearing it. Ephraim.
Pat, Democratic presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand compared pro-life beliefs to racism and anti-Semitism in Iowa Tuesday. When asked about the problem of imposing a litmus test on judges, the New York senator told the Des Moines Register protecting abortion is more important.
I think there's some issues that have such moral clarity that we have as a society decided that the other side is not acceptable. Imagine saying that it's okay to appoint a judge who's racist or anti-Semitic or homophobic. There is no moral equivalency when you come to racism. And I do not believe there's a moral equivalency when it comes to changing laws that deny women reproductive freedom.
Gillibrand said those who want to outlaw abortion are imposing their religious beliefs on others, which she says is against the Christian faith. Pro-life advocates often complain the mainstream media is biased against their views, while the major media insist they're neutral. Their internal guidelines and coverage appear to say otherwise. Here's Paul Strand.
Pro-life types bemoan the killing of more than 60 million unborn babies since the Supreme Court legalized nationwide abortion. But media types like NPR are telling their reporters that babies are not babies until they're born. They're fetuses. Appearing on CBN News' Faith Nation, Daily Signal commentator Jarrett Stepman quoted a recent New York Times opinion headline.
Abortion saves lives and pregnancy kills, which of course sounds, I think, to many to be very much Orwellian. But I think for many in the New York Times audience, that makes sense, especially how this issue is covered by the mainstream media, by the press in this country.
He and many in the pro-life movement find evidence the press favors one side.
Certainly the terminology is an important factor in this. NPR, National Public Radio, which of course gets public funding, recently had a set of guidelines that said to reporters, don't use terms like pro-life, don't use terms like partial birth or fetal heartbeat or things like this.
NPR said in a statement to CBN News, we acknowledge that discussing divisive topics with both sensitivity and accuracy can be challenging. We're constantly evaluating best practices, and the language may evolve. In a debate where the terms pro-life and pro-choice have become taboo, NPR okays using anti-abortion rights, but not pro-abortion rights. Christian radio host Eric Metaxas says the sensitive subject should be addressed in real terms.
The people of America need to think about what happens during an abortion. We need to discuss it. It is gruesome. We need to face the gruesomeness of it.
But there's also what gets covered and what doesn't, like the annual National March for Life, which over the decades has become history's biggest ongoing demonstration.
It's attracted millions of people who have come out in support of this movement, and it gets almost no coverage at all from the press. This is a fairly large movement where you see so many smaller movements get enormous coverage from the press.
You certainly don't see the mainstream national media dealing with the recent physical or verbal assaults pro-life activists have faced outside abortion clinics or on college campuses.
Whether that is a conscious or unconscious bias, I think that bias is certainly there.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Comedian Jon Stewart delivered a strong rebuke to Congress Tuesday. He was speaking on behalf of first responders made sick by working in the toxic debris of Ground Zero following the 9/11 terror attacks. Stewart called on Congress to make sure a victims' compensation fund doesn't run out of money. Establishing the fund and making sure it stays viable is a battle Stewart's fought for years.
Your indifference costs these men and women their most valuable commodity, time. It's the one thing they're running out of.
The meeting was held in the full committee hearing room. It was meant, though, only for subcommittee members. The sight of the row of empty seats fueled Stewart's anger. However, 12 of the 14 subcommittee members did attend that hearing. A vaccine to prevent Alzheimer's is in the works at the University of New Mexico. There are news reports researchers have only tested the vaccine on mice, but the mice that received the drug showed improvement over those that didn't. Researchers say the vaccine targets a protein found in a brain with Alzheimer's that contributes to the tangles that disrupt neurons and can lead to the disease. We applaud any movement and improvement in there. Pat?
Indeed, we do. On this program, I had Dr. Bredesen explaining a technique that he had developed, and he said, frankly, he thinks that Alzheimer's is the result of inflammation, and it relates back to the whole physical being of the human body and the way we live and what we've done to ourselves and how we've assaulted it with various chemicals and so forth. But he says that the Alzheimer's, he thinks, is a reaction to inflammation. So and I don't know if a vaccine will do the job. I think he, of course, advocated a type of treatment that involved two specific drugs, and the FDA wouldn't have authorized it. They said, we can only approve one drug. We can't let you have two. Well, in his prescription, he said it'll take two to do it, but the FDA said no. So now they're looking to something else. I don't think there's a, quote, germ in there that's going to be killed by some kind of a drug that will alleviate Alzheimer's, but I'm with Eric. I think anything we could do to alleviate that terrible disease would be very welcome.